We started off at a very important place, didn't we, with that statement that we're going to be issuing around Ukraine. And it feels appropriate to take a moment to pause with that. And actually it feels very appropriate that we're moving from that to looking at this theme of the reconciliation of the whole earth. Ukraine and other situations like it are weighing heavily on us, aren't they? I had, before I came up here, I had my next door neighbour on the phone to me in tears, totally overwhelmed by what she was seeing on the news and by the situation, and just needed someone to talk to about that. Feeling under pressure as to how she could help, desperately wants to take a refugee into her home, or maybe I should say desperately wants to help, but doesn't want to open her home up to refugees for various reasons. And we talked that through, but was feeling such pressure. How could she respond? She wanted to respond. What could she do? It was all too much for her, and she burst into tears on the phone, and we talked it through. What does she do to manage her anxiety levels? I know she goes out into her garden and she gardens. She listens to the robin. Actually, she doesn't listen to the robin. She talks to the robin that comes into both of our gardens. I occasionally talk to him as well. She looks at the birds that are feeding in her bird feeder. She gets her hands dirty. She gets her hands into the soil. Did you know that there are microorganisms in the soil that trigger our hormones, our happy hormones? We are absolutely connected to the wider natural world. It's not that we're humans over here and then the environment is over there. We are intricately connected. When we get our hands into the soil, it triggers happy hormones inside of us. Biblically, we are Adam from the Adamah. The Adamah is Hebrew for ground. And Adam really is a play on words. We are created as the earth creatures. We are earthy ones. We are created to get our hands dirty, to get our hands into the soil. We are created to have our well-being linked to the amount of time that we're able to get outside. Our well-being is linked to the health of the wider natural world. These things are completely connected. So I want to ask you, before we go any further today, to pause and to close your eyes. And I'd like to ask you to recall a favourite place of yours where you know that you go to for your well-being. Maybe it's a place that God has particularly spoken to you in the past, a place out in the natural world. It may be just sitting out on your balcony and looking at the pots you have there. It may be a city park. It may be your garden if you have one. It may be out somewhere much more out into the countryside. It may be a particular wilderness place. Not that we have many areas of that left anymore. But what comes to your mind? What place comes to your mind in the natural world? Picture yourself there, not as a consumer of that place, but as part of that place, as part of the community of creation that you are in. And as you see that place and see yourself in it, ask God to fill you with a new love for that place, for the plant pot you might be looking at, or the hills and maybe you're by a beach, ask God to show you how God looks at that place. And then, holding on to that place, begin in your mind to move out in your vision, as if it's a camera spanning out. So you see the place that is a part of, whether it's a city or a village or your county. Picture the nation that is a part of. Picture yourself, the view moving out until you are looking at the whole world. That picture of the blue and white marble that we're familiar with. And as you see that, again, ask God to be giving you a fresh understanding of what God thinks when God looks at those places. Ask him to give you a new sense of love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world. You can open your eyes if you like, or you can keep them closed, I don't mind. I wanted us to start in that place because when we get to talking and thinking about things like the environment and the climate crisis and so on, they can become very technical jargon things, conceptual things, can't they, that kind of exist far away from us. And I wanted us to start by rooting us in the physical, tangible world. As I said, this isn't about something that's separate to us, but this, I believe, starts, the kind of things we're looking at in this session, starts with love for a particular place, and then spreads out from there. Do you know the opposite of love isn't hate? The opposite of love, literally, is apathy. Apathy, without feeling. When we don't love, then we don't act. We don't bother to do anything. We don't respond. And so this session isn't about a load of scientific concepts to do with the climate crisis. This session is about us being rooted in God's love for this world. Genesis 1:31 really says it all. God looked at each individual day, so to speak, that was made and said it's good. And then God looked at everything. And we know what God said, don't we? God said, it is very good. That is such a powerful affirmation that destroys years of bad theology that we've grown up with and inherited, that says that the material world, the physical world, is inferior to the so-called spiritual world. Genesis 1:31 tells us that matter matters to God. God looks at all that God had made and says, it is very good. And so we need to get a hold of God's love for this world. Get a hold of how God feels when he looks at the plant pot on your balcony or the crocuses coming through in the city park or the fields and the beach or whatever it is. And of course, more widely. Job 38 and 39 are just stunning passages. You'll know the hugeness of Job 38 when the Lord answers to Job, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Who shut the sea with doors when it burst out from the womb? incredible words. I'd love to read out the whole of Job 38, but you get that absolute awesome hugeness of this amazing creator God, which then continues on into the first verses of Job 39, funnily enough. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the deer? Can you number the months that they fulfill? Do you know the time when they give birth, when they crouch to give birth to their offspring? And it goes on. There's a beautiful picture of this creator, huge creator God, also as a God of intimacy, a God who knows us and loves us, who crouches down and watches us, looks over us in all of our individual situations. So we start this morning from that place of being rooted in place and being rooted in God's love for what God has made. But we need to go fairly swiftly from there to recognising what is going wrong in this world. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm sure this is the part you're dreading. It's that bit in the Attenborough thing that you don't want to have to watch when you've been enjoying all of the beauty. But we do need to be reminded again of our groaning creation and of what is happening in our world. There are three things particularly that I want to highlight. One is the climate crisis, and I've just put up a few images there to illustrate that. The image on the left there is from a crippling drought that hit in northern Kenya. It's an area that we've been working in as Tearfund through a partner called Food for the Hungry, helping bring in a health programme and a nutrition programme, as well as bringing in emergency water. We face a climate crisis. We're seeing it all over the world. We're seeing it with a heat dome in Canada, with wildfires in Australia and California, with terrible floods in Western Europe. And we know, of course, that it's the poorest people in the world who are suffering the greatest impacts. And at Tearfund, we hear and see every day the devastating impact that the climate crisis is having on people living in poverty. I want us to watch a video from one of our staff members who actually can explain it better than I can. So let's turn and have a look at the screen. Thanks, Jenny.
My name is Idzai Morimba. I am the Deputy Country Director for Tearfund in Zimbabwe. Food insecurity is a big issue we are dealing with, and we are probably going to see a lot more if the climate crisis is not addressed. Secondly, as a result of the food insecurity, we see quite a lot of cases of malnutrition, and in some cases deaths due to hunger. Malnutrition in the sense that, families might end up with just maize, but then they don't have, a variety. They then are stuck with just a few grains, and they can't then have other things to sort of support so that they've got a nutritional balanced diet. The number of child marriages increase in years of droughts, where families think marrying off our daughter is better because we get something from the family that's taking the daughter, or it's one less person to feed. We see how, there's quite a lot of gender-based violence where spouses are fighting because of hunger in the family, as a result of the unhappiness, or, that's caused because of no food at household level. So definitely without any major interventions, we'll probably see quite a lot of that. Child marriages as well as domestic violence are linked to food insecurity issues. Compromised access to clean water as well. So most communities have wells, some even at household level, but then because, sometimes they dry up, they have to walk further and further. And sometimes because the water points or the access to water is limited, They just use what's there without even testing on the quality. And in the end, they access water that is not really suitable for human consumption. So some children are at home because they're hungry, they can't get money for school fees, because the family doesn't have enough food, they can't sell enough to raise money for school fees. So definitely we see how generations can then be affected. If they can't go to school, we'll have a generation of semi-illiterate children. I think there is enough justification and cause for global efforts to just address climate change, because the impacts, I think, are really major and cause quite a lot of negative impacts to households and communities in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I can. I don't think this... Okay, let me know when this is back on again, because it's easier than the lectern mic. Okay, let me know when it's back. Thanks. So I could talk around the climate crisis for a long time, but I'm going to leave it there, and I know this will be things that we're familiar with already. Biodiversity loss is another area that I want to highlight. Again, without going into it with too much time, we are facing an unprecedented rate of biodiversity loss. The experts can't really quite say how many times more than the natural rates of extinction, but possibly up to 1,000 times higher than the natural rates. Great, thanks. And I've just put up a few species to illustrate that. The Komodo dragon, I've actually been to one of the only 2 islands in the world that Komodo dragons live on and have seen them. So it's I would say it's a species close to my heart, but I'm not quite sure that you can have a Komodo dragon close to your heart. But anyway, the Komodo dragon is threatened with extinction because it does just exist on these 2 islands, and rising levels of seawater mean that it's being increasingly squeezed into particular patches of the island. The jaguar there is a Russian jaguar, and there are something like only 100 of those left in the wild. So it may not be long, unless serious steps are taken, before the Russian jaguar becomes extinct. The puffin up there, that absolutely dearly beloved bird of ours, is now on the list of being threatened with extinction because of warming seas, which mean that the particular species of fish that it depends on are dwindling in their numbers. Of course, I could go through so many other species as well. We are facing just a devastating loss of species. And if we believe that all creatures have been created by the God who we worship, then this is devastating for us. All creatures bear the handprints of God, bear the fingerprints, the handiwork, the fingerprints of God. How must God feel with creatures that God has made going extinct? Of course, the climate crisis is one of the reasons for that, but also how we're using the land and the seas with our intensive agriculture and development and overfishing, all down to our behaviour. And then the third area is plastic pollution. This is something that was really in our minds before the pandemic, wasn't it? And it seems to have slipped out of our consciousness over the last couple of years. But it's still there and it's still happening. We are almost literally drowning in plastic as a world. There is too much plastic. And that is causing problems in the oceans, as is well documented. It's causing problems to ourselves. It's now thought that all the time we are breathing in tiny particles, microparticles of plastic that are in the atmosphere and are ingesting it through our food. And it's causing terrible problems to people living in poverty. 2 billion people in the world lack access to proper waste management. That's 1 in 4 people lack access, and an extra 1 billion people have their waste collected but not discarded safely. We did some research at Tearfund and came up with the horrendously staggering figure that 1 person every 30 seconds dies from mismanaged waste because of the diseases and the pollution and the flooding that it causes. So plastic pollution is an issue that we have to face. So how do we respond to these things? And of course there are many other issues, sadly, that I could highlight too. I was speaking at a conference some while ago, and it was over a couple of days. I was doing the whole conference, so a variety of different sessions, and had spoken the day before, and the next morning a young woman came up to see me, and she hadn't stayed over that night. She'd gone home because of childcare, and she said to me that evening, when she got home, she sat and she was playing Lego with her little boy, and they were building a house each. And she said, I really went to town building my Lego house. She said, I probably invested a bit too much in this Lego house, but I really went for it and built this amazing Lego house. And then my toddler, when he'd finished doing his, she said he got up, walked over and just went and knocked the whole thing over. She said, I was so angry. And then I stopped, and she said, and I felt God saying, yes, this is, how do you think I feel when you destroy the home that I have created? And that was a real moment for her. And I think when we see the kind of things that we've been just touching on briefly, we need to allow some space to take that on and acknowledge the absolute mess that we have made. We're talking about reconciliation over these few days, aren't we? And I'm sure we have heard already that we can't have reconciliation without lament and confession and repentance. So I want to ask you to sit quietly now and to take a bit of time just to express to God, how does this make you feel? Does it make you feel angry? Does it make you feel overwhelmed? Does it make you feel a bit numb? Kind of, oh yeah, I've heard it all before and there's nothing I can do. I'm not going to let it, I can't do anything, so I'm not going to let it permeate. How does it make you feel? I wonder, what are some words that you would use? Are there areas where you know that you are part of the problem? And I would encourage you to bring those to God and to lay them at his feet in confession. So I'm going to give us a few minutes of silence and space just for you to have your own conversation with God. It may be that you have never talked with God about these issues. They're issues that don't really feature in your faith language, in your faith life. Maybe you've never really listened to God about these areas of concern and you've pushed them away, and so this will be your first time. But let's take a couple of minutes in quiet for you to have your own conversation with God now.